in 100 years, if we don't have flying cars and jetpacks and like life extension, it's going to be because we don't have the software. There's mechanical engineering part that definitely doesn't help, but the software is a bigger barrier. And in fact, products companies, there usually are many more programmers than there are hardware engineers, because that's the part that's harder.
I am a victim of Murphy's Law. That's Steve's 10th power. Don't correct my math. I don't even know if that makes sense.
Murphy's Law at the 10th power?
Yeah.
Murphy's Law times.
So, hey, whatever can happen, whatever can go wrong, goes wrong. But if it's just me left to my own devices, something will absolutely go wrong. How would you calculate that in math?
Not numerically. So you said you left your own devices. So, not exists x1, x comma x2, where x1 equals Steve and x2 not equals x1 implies f. We can enumerate all the bad states and then put an f in front of it, which means at some point in the future will happen. Although with that particular formulation, it could happen after the end of the universe. That kind of system doesn't give you an upper bound when it will happen. Just say it will happen in the future.
I was once referred to as an idiot savant minus the savant. So that's how you. That's me. So I'm really nervous talking to really smart people. But anyway, welcome to another episode of Think Beyond Possible podcast. This show serves obviously to introduce individuals who are working on fantastic things in technology, but also to inspire individuals who are looking to break in technology and want to get tips, tricks, and hacks from just really intelligent people who have been there, give them a little bit of inspiration. A lot of people find that, they feel imposter syndrome or they think there's some wall that they can't defy. So when they hear these hacks, it's inspiring. So I'm with Jimmy Koppel, is the right way to say it. Adios mio. Okay. And before we get into it, Jimmy, I'd just like to give you a few seconds to introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you for that, Steve. So my name is Jimmy, and so I've kind of been passionate for my entire adult life about making the world of software better and kind of fixing, this fortunate fact that, software sounds like it should be easy to change because it's bits, not atoms. Really, it's not. And so in a lot of ways, software is keeping it as it past, and I really don't like that. So I kind of devoted a lot of my work to fixing that. Currently, I actually run two companies. My first company is called Mirdin, where we try to turn good software engineers into great ones, especially a lot of people who have non-traditional backgrounds and kind of feel a chip on their shoulder about it.
Yeah.
And my other company is Up to Speed, where we help companies have more developers deeply understand their code base, and we help developers understand large code bases much faster.
Okay. That's we'll get into those in a bit. Usually I do a little research. You have a lot of things to read about you. First and foremost, education-wise, you went to Carnegie Mellon undergrad.
Yes.
Pittsburgh. You also have a Ph.D. from MIT.
That's correct.
That's insane. So you have been or contributed to 18 publications. Some publications major, some publications minor, which I don't even know what that means. But how does one find their way into contributing to publications?
Yeah, so there's a pretty wide spectrum of research, and say a research project. The bar is it has to contribute something new to the world, probably something generalizable that other people might be interested in, and there's a really wide spectrum. So this can run the gamut from, we checked how this technique works in this data set, and now other people can cite us instead of having all the work to run it themselves, all the way up to we developed new algorithms. And I worked pretty much on the whole gamut throughout my career.
Okay. So I feel like there's a saying for a lot of things. You can go a few ways. Such and such is not born, they're made. I feel like you came out of the womb ready to code, ready to do math. When did you realize, I guess you were always interested in math, or?
Yeah, so I think I kind of had a knack for growing up, but like the math that's taught in most schools, especially before college, kind of like say it's not real math. And there's a really great essay called A Mathematician's Lament, where it kind of likens the way math is commonly taught to as if students in music were forced to memorize notes and scales but couldn't actually play a song. And so so I was pretty fortunate that sometime in high school I really got turned on to like the fun sides of math, where it's all about exploration and creativity and walking with deep understanding, and not about like memorization and formulas.
Okay. It just came naturally to you, or did you find certain ways to learn it that help it stick with you?
Something that's fortunate is that in most schools in the U.S. where I'm from, they'll have everyone kind of compete in the qualifier to the qualifier to the qualifier to the qualifier to the International Math Olympiad. And if you do really well on that, you go to the next. If you do really well on that, then which you only need like this thing to do to school for, then a lot of math camps and clubs and stuff start sending you mail. One of them was called Canada USA Math Camp, where I went for 2 years, and totally life changing. Um, so, and on a more unsavory note, a reason you might have heard of Canada USA Math Camp before is that if you follow the FTX scandal a lot, three of the four big shot. That's right, not three of the three of the five biggest people there went to the same math camp that I did in the same years.
You went where I wasn't going to dare to go. You did go to school with the man himself.
So yeah, I did not overlap with SBF at MIT, but I did know him through math camp a little bit.
So you just always knew you kind of wanted to go into computer science. I guess when you were young, you were writing programs. You contributed to Heroes of Might and Magic, which I guess growing up you were into, game that well.
Yeah, so I'm absolutely obsessed with the Heroes of Might and Magic series, and so I got really into reverse engineering because I wanted to create a mod of it, and I spent 2 years while I was an undergrad reverse engineering and figuring out how to technically modify the game without its source code.
How did you get into reverse engineering? For anyone who's curious about tech, I think reverse engineering is always a good way to learn something, even if you like cars or something. How did one reverse engineer something they're interested in?
Basically, reverse engineering is a pretty broad term.
Yeah.
Basically, you could say engineering is a process going from design to actual objects or software. And reverse engineering is anything that goes in the other direction. So this runs the gamut from, I'm just looking at a file. I'm just looking at a file formats. Like I'm looking how this program saves its files, and I try to figure out that this one part corresponds to the number of hit points you have, and I'm going to open a hex editor and change that. That actually is a pretty nice intro thing you can often do. Just like open a hex editor and search for a certain number in it. It's very suspicious, and try changing it and see what happens.
The first nugget.
Yeah, and it goes all the way up from there to where you can use fancy decompilers to sometimes you don't have the source code, but you can make, like you have a server, you can try to make guesses about how something works based on how, by poking at it and seeing how it interacts. There's also reverse engineering physical objects as well.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's an absolutely fun field because once you get into it, you kind of feel like you have more mastery over everything around you.
I only wish I had such curiosity growing up. That's amazing. We'll get first into your passion. So your life's mission, as your quote, my life mission is to reduce the global cost of software maintenance by 100x. Chasing the first 10x, I train professional software engineers to make software in a way that makes it easier to extend and modify. And basically, you mentioned that your passion is making software engineers better.
Yeah, that's correct. That's part of that.
Sounds very altruistic. Is it? What is it? Is that what's it grounded in?
So a quote someone told me growing up that's kind of stuck with me is that it's in 100 years, if we don't have flying cars and jetpacks and like life extension, it's going to be because we don't have the software. And when you let a lot of things around you and like compare it to like the Jetsons or an optimistic sci-fi, very often the thing that's holding us back the most is software. It's like, what's holding us back from having robots do our chores for us? There's mechanical engineering part that definitely doesn't help, but the software's a bigger barrier. In fact, for the robotics companies, there usually are many more programmers than there are hardware engineers because that's the part that's harder.
And with Mirdin, you mentioned that you are trying to focus on, correct me if I'm wrong, not like absolute beginners, but turning good software engineers into great software engineers. So you have to have sort of a basis before you jump in.
Yeah, that's right. And the one we found is that, so I started doing this kind of thing 8 years ago. Started with one-on-one coaching, now have courses, train over 400 people. And kind of found like eight years ago that there were a lot of people who were really working on helping people get into programming and get into the first job. but not a lot of people helping them afterwards and helping them advance. And it's 8 years later, and that's still the case.
I was watching the video. You mentioned something along the lines of the experience was really important to you. So you said, correct me if I'm wrong once again, you had been doing live courses and you weren't going to switch to pre-recorded unless you were able to make them just as engaging as the live experience. But then you said after 6 months, you figured out how to do so. Can you tell me about the experience and how you were able to capture the magic?
Yeah, so I think a lot of it is just having taken so many people through live version. You teach the same lecture 15 times, and you see questions people have, understandings, people do homework, you see it sent in, and you realize a lot of the ways that people can misunderstand something and can go wrong. There's a lot of iteration polishing, and so so now when people send their homeworks, even if they don't have a human to give them personalized feedback, like we've graded hundreds of these before, and we can just have a list of every way that people can mess up, every misunderstanding people can have. And so it's actually, as kind of a side note, since I've gotten into like the research of learning science and tutoring. So it's pretty well known that having a one-on-one tutor, it produces a huge benefits. There's a common line that's a 2 sigma effect, the Bloom 2 sigma effect. That's kind of a lie. It's actually 0.7 standard deviations, not 2, but still really good. But there's actually at least one study on something called canned text remediation, which says you can get almost good an effect size just by having people grade their own answers based on common mistakes you give them.
Really?
And that's not to say that it doesn't matter what your canned text is. It matters a lot. But now that we've had this polishing that comes from having seen where people mess up, we can get a lot of it. But like we kind of went too far, and like now we still offer personalized feedback to those who need it. We still have discussion sessions where people can ask their questions.
Still like an important part of the learning experience, I guess. Engagement. I mean, you're breaking down education in a way, like you're going into the matrix. So what in layman's, what are the most important aspects of education or learning? So obviously for students that may or may not join Xccelerate, they're obviously looking for the optimal place to learn because maybe they've tried self-study. We know the internet is full of content. There's no shortage of content. People think, oh, I can self-study. I'll try to learn this. A lot of people, I think, fail because fewer things, analysis paralysis, imposter syndrome, but I think accountability as well. So like if somebody hits a wall when they're learning something and they fail and they're not sure who to ask for help, they just quit. Right, which I think for MOOCs or something, the completion percentage is anywhere between like 10 and 12%.
Yeah.
And so you have probably studied these things. What do you feel is the most important aspects of learning the new skill, aside from, what you guys already said you apply it, period, from the learner side, and less so the teacher side?
Most important aspects of learning a new skill. And so, and you can look at that at a number of angles, both motivation as well as the effectiveness of teaching.
Mm-hmm.
So one model I know kind of sees it as 3 dimensions.
Mm-hmm.
There's the efficacy, value, and supportive environment.
Mm-hmm.
So someone who's high efficacy is really good at it, but low value and unsupported environments will tend to be in like the kind of rebellious category, kind of become rebellious. Like they can do it, but they won't. Whereas someone who has high motivation, but in supportive environments, but they're not really good at it, they'll be the ones who are asking for help all the time. It's a pretty good. That's a pretty good analysis, like for every point in that cube, like what kind of behavior to expect.
Yes.
You definitely need all 3. And that actually ties into something like learning materials, because if the learning materials are not good enough, then you tend to get low efficacy. Okay. And of course, if it's built for the wrong audience, it might also get low value. So like growing up, I remember like reading programming books, and they're all about, it's like, oh, well, suppose you're at your job and you need to process a bunch of receipts, which is not motivating at all for a kid. Not a problem I have. Now I'm the other way around.
Okay, so up to speed. Now we're moving to up to speed from Mirdin. Builds AI that helps companies have more software developers who deeply understand their code base. You also mentioned something else, which I think maybe they're connected. You are creating programs that write programs that write programs.
Yes, my PhD work.
So my question when I first saw your mission is to improve software engineers as like at the very human level. Like you're teaching them how to be better. And then we're entering this age of AI where everyone's like screaming from the hilltops, you're going to get replaced. And then they're saying, oh, there will be no software engineers in the future. And then there's some people in the middle that are saying, oh, let's use AI to augment software engineers. You're on both sides. How do you see this harmony?
Well, I don't see us both sides. I'm pretty invested in the side that humans are going to stay relevant, at least at senior levels, for long enough.
There's no conflict of interest, for example. That's maybe not the right way to put it, in terms of what you're doing with up to speed and what you're doing with Mirdin. So up to speed is more of augmenting.
Yeah, exactly. You want to do a feature, someone who's been in the company for 5 years might be able to take minutes, while someone who just joined, even someone very extraordinary, might take days or weeks.
Mhm.
You know, the story I got from one person who was actually at Snap for 3 years, then changed teams, just changed his team, said, well, I spent 2 days doing this thing and then 2 weeks making sure it didn't break anything else. Whereas a more senior person in the team would have just already known whether it breaks something else. And so basically, we get people to that level of knowledge faster.
Okay.
If you haven't worked in a long code base for a while, then there's this really great feeling that kind of hits at some point where you go from not understanding anything to understanding everything and being able to figure out huge changes in your head.
Okay.
And it's incredibly satisfying, and we bring that to people faster.
That's very cool. That's very cool. You are currently hiring.
Mhm.
So what are you hiring for? And when you're hiring, what is your ideal team or company culture that you try to create?
Yeah, so we're currently hiring in both engineering and in sales. There's a thing that every early stage startup needs, which is different from a mid stage startup or later company, which is you have to be very, very irreverent.
Mhm.
You have to not want to do the way everything else does it. You have to be really invested in the company's mission. It's preventing knowledge loss in software and helping people get up there faster.
Mhm.
You really invest in that mission, and you have to be willing to do things that are well outside your job description. You have to be willing to care about the company as a whole, and really be obsessed with the customers. And so, like an engineer in an early stage startup has to be like an engineer, but they also might meet investors, and they also might going to meet talk to a lot of customers, as opposed to like an engineer later stage company where if you just want to sit in your cubicle and write code, then there's a good place for you to do that.
Then in terms of like your hiring process, how are you able to decipher these qualities in somebody who might want to work with you?
So the part of it is self-selecting. 'Cause like every early stage startup, we like give less cash but more equity, and so it takes a certain kind of person who, is like who could be off and go to a Facebook or an Amazon and make huge salaries, and was willing to say no. It's like, I want to do this exciting risky thing. It's going to challenge me and expose me to the outside world in ways working inside a big company won't. So that part is self-selecting. And then it's like where possible, it's like we like to work with people for a bit before making the final decision, just contractors. It also helps with Mirdin. That's some people we can see how they are before hiring them. It's not officially, but it's like my co-founder Nils, I met him and originally a student through Mirdin.
That's pretty cool. I feel like you have your bases covered. I feel like you're going to be a more benevolent Elon Musk that's not going to buy a company and make great things, make the cars fly. I can see it. You have a great vision and graph.
Let's hope so.
We were doing this career fair where we were asking hiring managers, HR questions about what they were looking for in a hire, and they usually said something along the lines of they were looking for people that were a good culture fit, people that had a certain energy, and they basically were saying they don't really care for skills within an ATS. What are your thoughts on this? Do you believe on ATSs?
I don't even know what that means.
Oh, it's like the machine that one the resume goes through, a CV goes through.
Oh,
to scam people, or like they look at the skills.
This whole thing about we don't care what skills you come in with, just care that you're good.
Mm-hmm.
In some ways, it's kind of a luxury that larger companies have,
Mm-hmm.
where they have a very large number of roles. They can find a place for people at all levels and know they'll keep them for a while. But also, I mentioned before, there's the onboarding problem that our company's created help with. So, I kind of dropped the line earlier about 6 months to get up to speed. And in larger companies, it's much larger. It's much more than 6 months. 2 years, Google and Facebook, we've heard. So they know that's like whatever skills you come in with, you're gonna have a long learning curve
Yeah.
to learn enough of how their particular systems work to be fully productive.
Okay.
And this startup is different. On the one hand, you have much less in the way of existing systems at the company to learn. On the other hand, you join a startup, you're going to be like a fifth, a 10th, or a 20th of the company. And there are a number of existing libraries that they use, and they want you to get productive with them very fast.
Mm-hmm.
And then also as a semi-deep tech company, where we are doing heavy things of program analysis and heavy things of AI, it's like, like we are looking for people who can bring expertise in various areas into the company and make a stronger overall on that. So we're going to be different from the hires you talk to.
Okay. Interesting. Okay, let's move on to the, I guess we'll do a final lightning round of questions. What kind of project should a junior developer be working on to get as a software developer? To get a job as a software developer?
So you get a lot of points if you have your own projects at all. And because I've looked at quite a few resumes where it's or even people sending code and like, oh, look, I created a thing that predicts movie sales for a given month. And it's like, oh, there's a lot here, but wait. It's like, why in the world would you be working on this? Do you have a contract with the theater? No. This looks like a class project. Yeah. And yeah, if you try to pass off a class project that has been not necessarily one where you said, oh, go build something and figure it out yourself, but like, here's a problem what to do. It's like, a good hiring manager will figure it out, and it'll look very bad. So just having your own project at all is a lot of points.
Yeah.
So different people are excited about just different things. So some people are going to be very excited if you build something that gets traction or that solves a real problem and has users, like build a simple website for a local coffee shop. Other people are going to get more excited if it actually does something technically hard. So actually, and as an anecdote, remember, it's my last employer before grad school, we interviewed a guy who's actually a pretty famous programmer, but he had not written much large software. And so the CEO asked him for something he's built. He shows that he built this thing, which a Chrome extension that hides your Facebook feed, and it got a lot of attention, a lot of traction. He just said, "I don't want to see that. That's 20 lines." So that kind of shows you kind of the different priorities people have.
Okay, I see.
Some people are going to be more interested in apps. Some like me are going to be more interested in maybe something that doesn't look very nice, but it has some hard math or algorithms under the hood.
Okay.
I also be impressed if it's a decent sized system, but it's very cleanly built.
See.
Everyone has their own priorities.
Seems like you are really satisfied with the way you sort of learned your skills. How would you start learning programming if you had to start over?
Yeah, and I definitely think there were a lot of things that made it more challenging than it could have been. Some of them have been solved. Like when I started, Stack Overflow did not exist.
Yeah.
I kind of had a feeling always growing up, like whatever I was doing, even if it's just making websites, like, well, I must be doing something that's like wrong or shady somehow. And I would like never ask for help online on the like chat rooms, places that did exist. That kind of became true later when I started doing reverse engineering.
Yeah.
Which is quite close to actual like breaking into stuff. But before that, it's like actually growing up, it's like, no, it's like, I'm just a kid making a website. There's no, that's awesome. And people love to help you. So like being willing to go on to developer communities like Reddits or IRCs that still exist.
Okay.
And forums and like ask for help can be really good.
Yeah.
And in fact, I remember reading a story about a teenager who became a speaker at the Closure conference in significant part by doing this, and gets a lot of points for being a kid.
Jimmy, thank you so much for being on and talking and inspiring people. And hopefully one day this has tens of thousands of views and listeners, and you were one of the first that will help make us great. So thank you.
It's good to be here. Thank you.